Let's talk about Inertia.js and Ruby on Rails and drawer components and optimistic UI updating. A lot of things. Hey, I'm Brian Knowles. I'm one of the authors and maintainers of the Ruby on Rails adapter for Inertia.js. And I want to continue talking through a demo application that I built a little while ago to surface some cool patterns we can do with Inertia. So in a previous video, walked through optimistic UI updates for this one sort of UI workflow, which is clicking this heart button or unclicking it. So we're optimistically updating the state of this heart, and that looks and feels really nice now. But it's a pretty simple pattern, pretty simple use case. And I want to talk through something that's real. This is a thing that we've done in actual applications. It's a little more involved, and I think feels really nice in the way that it works with Inertia. So I'm going to show off the actual basic UI pattern because it's in place, and then we'll adjust it to add the optimistic updating. So if you see here, this application, as a quick refresher, is just a list of NBA basketball games from last season, and you can scroll around and save games that you like into your account and save them for later. So if we look at the score column here, you'll notice the text is orange. It's because it's a link. And if we click any of these, we're actually going to get a drawer that opens up with a quarter-by-quarter breakdown of the scoring in this game. And so we're going to run this UI through Inertia.js and through Inertia Rails. But before I do that, it's worth taking a quick second to talk about modals and drawers in general in Inertia.js, because there's a few different sort of tactics and strategies that you can use to render them. First of all, you can just have a regular old local state controlling the state of a drawer or a modal. There's no need to actually manage anything in Inertia.js, but often there's some benefits. And so there's a second method, Inertia UI. Inertia UI is a library that's written by one of the members of the core team of Inertia.js, Pascal. He works at Laravel these days and is really releasing a lot of cool updates. So this has first-party support and is also supported in Inertia Rails, and basically allows you to treat a modal or a drawer as a completely separate page. It gets its own URL, its own page object, that sort of thing. And so that works as well. But in my case here, I don't really consider this to be a separate page. I kind of like it as a sort of conditional part of the existing page. And there's another piece here. A reason I don't want to reach for local state is because I would use locally managed drawer if I had all the page or all the data on the page when the page loads. So if I'm just sort of taking data that's already there, stuffing it into a modal, it might make sense to just use a locally managed state variable. But in this case, what we're doing, we're actually pulling this data from a third-party API. So it's a kind of an awkward fit for that. So the pattern that I'm going to show off here is managing the state of this drawer with query parameters and a controller concern in Inertia. And let me paste in a quick text description of what that looks like, and then we'll walk through it, because it's really important to understand kind of how the pieces are fitting together before we even get into the sort of UI responsiveness that you get from optimistic UI updates. Okay, so the way this works here, we have a game row component, and that component is rendering each row here. And all that's happening here when we click this link is it's just an anchor tag. It's just a regular old anchor tag with a blank href. And so that is going to load whatever the current page is. And it's an href managed by Inertia.js, so Inertia will intercept the request, send it to the server, and then merge the page response back into our client-side app. But it is just an anchor tag. And what it's doing is it's adding a query parameter to the URL that it's fetching, and that's the detailed game ID. You can actually see this when I click the drawer. We get this detailed game ID. This has a couple really nice benefits. If you open this in a new tab. This will just open up with the actual state of the drawer open with the correct game sort of in there. And then I also have now a easily shareable link. I could text this to someone, I could send it on an email, and they'll see exactly what I'm seeing right now. Now, this isn't sort of new or revolutionary or even part of Inertia.js. This is just kind of how HTML is supposed to work as a protocol. So one of the nice things about Inertia is that we're using a rich client-side framework, but it feels very much like the sort of basic protocols that HTML has. Okay, so we send this request to the server with a query parameter. At the server, which you can see here, is in our base controller. For these controllers, we've got a game detailable concern. I mentioned a query parameter and a concern. That is our concern. And all this thing is doing is just calling inertia share. Inertia share is a class method in a controller, and when you call it, whatever comes out of it is going to get merged into the page props across multiple actions. So this is called sharing because you're sharing data across multiple actions instead of having to have individual data loaded and merged into each action. Okay, so really important here. We are basically no-opping. This becomes a no-op unless this detailed game ID parameter exists. And if it does exist, then we go hit this. This is a real API. I'm pulling real data from this API. We're going to turn it into a JSON object and then send that back in the inertia response. Also, one more important little thing, we're sending the parameter right back to the client. This is nice because our client is going to use this. It's for convenience. The client could pull that out of the URL itself and figure it out, but I like to do this. I like to send our parameters back if our client is going to be using those. Okay, so that's the first thing. We have a regular link. It's going through this concern to load data, and then our game details drawer is rendering just a regular old drawer. But the interesting part here is this is drawer open variable. So this is what's controlling the open or close state of our drawer. And all it's doing is checking for the presence of this query parameter, this detailed game ID that we pass through in our concern. And this is coming up here. We're destructuring this out of our page props. And so inertia, kind of the server, is what is controlling the state of this drawer rather than some sort of local piece of state. Okay, so that is how this works. Is this fine? This actually works okay, but we're going to do the thing that we did in the last video is we're going to simulate some latency. What happens if we put a sleep command in front of all these requests? You're going to see this bar loads, and then, oh, after a second and a half, our drawer opens up and we see this. Oh, one thing I forgot to go through. What happens when we close the drawer? Okay, so in our close handler in this details drawer, all that's happening here is we're just sort of reloading the page via inertia, but we're reloading the page without that detailed game ID parameter. Again, that is the thing that is sort of controlling the open close state here. So we're not controlling the drawer directly, but we are controlling the thing that controls that. Okay, so if I click this, we're going to see the same thing. It takes a while for the drawer to actually close. And now with our heart checking and unchecking, having that optimistic update, which you just saw, is nice, but wow, this is really sluggish when we're opening up a drawer. This is a really pretty bad experience for a user. So this is kind of a nicer place, I think, to show off the benefits of an optimistic UI update. And so we can do the same thing that we did with the heart here, is we can use a client-side visit from Inertia.js. This is a feature from the 2.0 release of Inertia. I'm going to go into our game row where the link is, and I'm going to copy paste in some code here so you don't have to watch me type. And this is just another handler, click handler, and we're going to add this onto our link. You'll notice here we're doing a partial reload in this link. It's not really important for this video, but just as a call out that this is a technique that is totally compatible with partial reloads, which are good for optimizing your responses. Okay, so what is this click handler doing? It's doing a client-side visit. And all this client-side visit is doing is before we make the request to the server, we're going to actually change the props on the page to add this detailed game ID. This is optimistically saying that, hey, when our response from the server comes back, we're expecting it to have this detailed game ID with the game ID from this row. And so we're going to set it before we actually make the request. Okay, we need to do one more thing here. Inside of our close handler, we need to do the reverse. So when we're closing that drawer, what we actually want to say is that our detailed game ID no longer exists. And that's what's going to come back from our server, but we're going to optimistically tell the UI to represent that state. Okay, with those two changes, let's see how it behaves now. We click this. Notice how immediately the drawer opens, and when I click the X here, immediately it closes. And you can see from the progress bar that the response is still taking like a second, second and a half, something like that. But we're getting that immediate feedback to the user. So starting to feel pretty good about this. This is much more snappy and responsive, what we would expect with a very modern, sort of rich client-side framework. But let's go a little bit further. I don't love that when we open this up, we get a blank white screen for a little bit. So let's see if we can fix that. And it's not super hard. We're still in our details drawer component, so we don't need to even leave that. I'm going to import this loading spinner, which is a component that I've already built out in the directory. And I need to figure out if we're loading. So what I'm going to say is if we have our detailed game ID, so detailed game ID exists, and there's not a detailed game yet, then that means we're loading. So I'm taking advantage of the fact that these two pieces of state mean something kind of different. This means that we want to load a detailed game, and the presence of this means that like one has actually loaded and is there. Okay, so now I'm going to go down here into my actual body of the drawer, and we're going to add the loading spinner. Okay, cool. Let's see what happens now. And then we click one of these games. Now we get this nice loading spinner while the request is going on. See, that one took quite a while. And we have the same sort of nice view of our component. Okay, so we're feeling even better. We have immediate feedback. We're giving in-process feedback to the user. So there's one more thing that I want to try to wire up here because we're only showing the happy path. This UI is assuming that everything we do is going to fetch data with no problems, and the real world is not so kind to us. So it's actually hard to get a real error from this API. It's got pretty good reliability, and even if it didn't, it would be hard to predict an error. So I'm going to create this method in our controller concern to simulate an error, and then I'm going to wrap this fetch in a begin rescue block. I'm going to paste in the rest of the code here. And so I'm going to simulate a timeout error, and we're going to rescue that timeout. And instead of sending back a detailed game, we're going to send back a new prop, a detailed game error, which is just going to be a string. This is not the most sophisticated error handling, but it gets the idea across. Okay. So this is the server side of that. Let's now go back into the details drawer, and we're going to pull that detailed game error out of our page props. And we need to make this is loading more sophisticated now, because there's now 3 states. We have as a result equals. Okay, so I'm going to create this new variable has a result, which is checking for the presence of an error or the presence of a detailed game object. And so what we're going to say here is if it's loading, is actually, if there's a game ID, but there's not yet a result, then we must be loading. Okay, so we don't need to change this at all, but we do need to add a new piece of code to handle our error case. So I'm just going to paste that in so I don't have to remember this massive tailwind classes. And okay, this should be ready to go. So again, I go into my concern. I'm going to simulate this error. And now when I click one of these games, we're going to get the second long pause, and we're going to get a nicely formatted error message back. Okay, so this looks pretty good. Now, in reality, you might want sort of application-wide or controller-wide handling for exceptional cases like this or errors, but this gets the point across, and I think shows us how we can do a lot with this pattern. And yeah, so to recap a little bit, let's go back to our initial list here. What have we actually done since then? Gonna copy paste in the updated list. Okay, so we're still adding a query parameter when we navigate, but before we do that, we're optimistically adding a detailed game ID prop, and that's gonna give us that quick response time. On the concern side, we're still no-opping if there's no query parameter. We're going to load the game data from that query parameter. We're still going to pass the query parameter back in the inertia page props, but we also have this new sort of path where we'll send back a detailed game ID if one exists. And then in our game details drawer component, we're still calculating our open close state from the query parameter. Our loading state is now controlled by the presence of either the detailed game object or an error. We are rendering an error if one exists, and we still close the drawer by just reloading the current inertia page without the query parameter. Okay, so why do I like this pattern so much? I think it has a really nice separation of concerns here. Our game row, where the link is, just has this link, and it's just sending this query parameter to the server. It's not really telling the UI what to do. It's just saying, hey, I want to know more about this detailed game. You go do what you need to do. In our concern, again, it is checking for the presence of this detailed game ID, but then it's just loading data. So it's going to send back either a detailed game or a detailed error, and it has no opinion on what the UI should do with that. Our details drawer, on the other hand, knows exactly what it wants to do with that data that's coming back. This data is not UI specific. It is very much the domain and sort of outside of the context of a UI at all. And so it can interpret how it wants to use that in these sort of logical Booleans. And then it also knows how to close itself. So it knows when I close myself, I'm just going to say, no more detailed game ID. Let's just get rid of that. And then everything else in the UI knows what to do. So the cool thing here is that we can actually swap out this drawer with like a modal component or even something that's not necessarily dynamic. Like we could have a div right over here that just showed the details of a game and wasn't sort of highly interactive like a modal, or wasn't screen blocking or anything like that. If we do that, the other two components, the game row and our concern, don't have to change at all. So I really like the way these things get split up and everything sort of has its own, it knows about what it needs to know about and nothing more, nothing less. So anyways, hope this is helpful. This is, again, the pattern we've used in quite a few places and has worked really well for us.